A continued welcome to Mobile World Congress Day 3. We're going to continue our story around TIP Academy. Just now we listened to myself and Christian Toivo talk about workforce development in the telecoms industry. Right now, I'm going to talk about how TIP Academy is actually functioning. So as I mentioned previously, TIP Academy is a framework for the industry to upskill and address the skills gap. So today I've invited two very important contributors who are already starting to work with TIP Academy to develop out the curriculum so that telecom professionals can really start to understand the meat and the substance of how to really develop the skill agenda. So allow me to introduce each other. So Marcin, maybe you can introduce yourself first. Actually.
Okay, so thanks for inviting me. My name is Marcin Dryjanski from Rimedo Labs. And what we are doing is developing XApps and RApps for Open Run. We are already porting them to multiple different rigs. So we have experience doing that, and we have lessons learned, which we also like to bring to the, let's say, learning capabilities through TIP Academy.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Marcin. And Samir, I'd like to introduce yourself. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Vish, for getting us here. I'm Samir Chatterjee from Rebaca Technologies. We have a product called Abbott, which is a test and validation software for 4G, 5G, and O-RAN. One of the challenges that we found in the industry is finding capable people that knows the how to debug, how to deploy these workloads. So we created a version of our product called Abbott Edu, which is a virtual lab that enables people to learn and get a hands-on experience on a 5G O-RAN ecosystem, which we are partnering with TIP and part of the learning contribution to the industry.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, both of you. Okay, so I'm going to ask you both certain questions. That's a lovely noise. Okay, so Marcin, I'd love to hear a little bit more about what Rimedo Labs does. If you can just talk a little bit more detail, maybe a little bit about the RIC platforms that you have, but also the XApps and RApps that you're doing,
Okay.
and perhaps some of the use cases that you're focusing on.
So we are basically a spin-off from the university, which means that we have capabilities to do algorithms, and we basically develop them and package them as XApps and RApps. So we started with XApps, including the use cases that are defined within O-RAN, which also means that we need to learn them, and then because of that we also could teach them. But we started with traffic steering use case, then managing the scheduler through quality of service resource optimization, but recently also focusing on beamforming management and massive MIMO use cases, and even more recently focusing on the two important aspects, which is energy saving and security. So those are pretty much the use cases, and in addition to that, there are also the XApps that we have. Now, speaking about porting them after we develop the algorithm to different rigs, currently we port them to one open source, which is ONF SD-RAN, and then also to the commercial one, which is VMware. And then we have lessons learned how they two differ and what it requires to develop those.
Fantastic. And let's understand that in sort of plain language. Many of the telecom engineers who are going through understanding of Open RAN, they probably are addressing a strategic need set, which is how do I ensure that my 5G RAN can perform in a more optimal fashion. So the use cases that Marcin's talking about, like traffic steering, energy efficiency, they are the most important agendas right now. So right now we think that actually as we start to build a curriculum with Rimedo Labs, we'll start to have a very important focused agenda for what is important to telecom operators and the professionals or the engineers within those organizations. Let's move on to Samir. So you talked about Abbott Edu. Would you mind just elaborating a little bit more about what the challenges you're trying to address and what you think Abbott Edu does?
Sure. So if you look at any learning experience around O-RAN or 5G, it's quite complex from 4G, where it is like 2-3 nodes to various nodes. virtualized platform, containerized architecture. And frankly, 3GPP specifications are pretty dry and they can be very complex to understand. So as you go into these universities or online programs and you're trying to learn or teach the professionals as to what these sequences are, what these messages are, it's very difficult for anybody to grasp without having actual hands-on experience. And you cannot really get a Mavenir or a Nokia hardware in a university setup. Way too expensive, costs a lot of money. So we have created this emulated virtual lab for ORAN, where you can simulate all these workloads and then you can run actual use case which maps into the 3GPP chapters where you are doing a registration or a kind of bidirectional PDU. You can simulate different traffic, whether it is IMS, video, and then we allow you to look at every interface level, PCAP level, logs that are generated. So as students read, they can go to this lab and actually execute these test cases, understand what's going on, look into a container, understand different things. So we kind of we see this gap when somebody goes into a job. There's a huge, time they take before they become productive. So we're trying to kind of somehow reduce the gap by getting them exposed to an actual system where they get a lot of hands-on with the theory. Brilliant. So that's what we are trying to bring to it along the TIP initiative, where you have all these e-learning programs and all these different courses. So as you learn a particular item, you go back and you try it, come back, and you go through, and our software is completely AI driven. So you don't need actually a professor or a human to grade or intimidate the students from making simple mistakes, these IEs and different. So everything that you're doing gets automatically graded, results are put out, students can rerun it, and then be very comfortable going through a completely like a bot situation and then become, quite rapidly become productive. That's the whole solution that we are bringing to the table.
Fantastic. That's really interesting. And if I translate that into how TIP Academy is building these wonderful products and solutions into the curriculum agenda, from a Rimedo Labs perspective, imagine if we have AI, ML software developers, or we have engineers who are looking to understand how to optimize the RAN, then it's a wonderful occasion for working in an interactive sense with Rimedo Labs and other partners to really understand how a RIC is built, how to build XApps and RApps, understand the conflicts that occur between them, and actually see the occasion of how they actually perform and what occurs there. So and then with Able Edu, test engineers or system integration engineers who are actually now at that place where they are looking at different Open RAN use cases and in a very digestible way trying to translate what is coming out 3GPP or ORAN Alliance and take it into a test environment where they can actually then simulate through different use cases and test and simulate test cases through and see the results out of that. It sounds like a very productive approach in terms of really ensuring there's an immersive experience in learning. And there'll be other partners that come on with TIP Academy. I mean, LabLabE is another virtual lab provider out there that is working with operators. And we see other ones like NEC and Mavenir coming to the table. They'll become very complementary with the other likes of VMware and VRV. I'd like to ask another question, if I may, and it's just a final question, really. So, Marcin, it's a harder one, but it's maybe a personal reflection, because you're on this journey as well with the industry, trying to drive forward what you believe is important, but also what the industry is trying to drive. What would you believe is a great vision? Where would you like to address skills gaps? What are the things that you would like to see in terms of a charter for the industry?
I think that there are two important aspects. One is how do we get more implementations of the particular types of solutions in terms of algorithms, so that we can improve the network, and then also how do we combine those that they work together, not like a separate ones. I think now we have the time where every XApp or RApp is implemented and visualized separately. We need to have them together in order to make sense for the operator, right? One XApp doesn't solve all the problems. The other topic is that there are several rig vendors at this point, and then each of them has somewhat different approach to how they enable doing those XApps and implement and test. So I believe there is a need for a common platform to make sure that we know how to develop those independently on what type of rig are you using. And then ultimately that the ORAN gets into the point that it will not make a difference for where you're doing that. And in addition to that, the use cases and the most important aspects that are needed to be solved at this point, which, for example, is energy efficiency. That is one of the courses that we are working on in TIP Academy.
Fantastic. That's very important. Great endeavors, and actually it mirrors very well with the TIP Open RAN RIA subgroup, where we do see different RIC platform providers coming out, different XApps and RApps developers coming out. But it's important to understand what are those commercial platforms out there and what configurations they have, and therefore also how to combine different XApps and RApps to work together. Samir, I'm going to ask you the same question, if I may. What do you see as the vision from your perspective?
You see, if you look at what's going on in the industry and most of the other people talking, AI and machine learning is the buzz. But ultimately, to get to that fully automated zero touch, it's a journey.
Sure.
And until we get there, humans and the operators who have been quite deeply involved in running the network have to be engaged in the process. They need to actually, people that have been running the network, they need to get first educated to understand what this new network is, as opposed to try to solve this in this voodoo type of manner. So the important thing is to bring the resource pool rapidly into this new technology, 5G, container, virtualized, open RAN, and all these things. Sure. Now, because there are so many different things, being able to come up with different means, and TIPS initiative is one of them, and that's why you look at on the Google, there are tons of 5G ORAN tutorials, training programs, all trying to bridge this gap, and they're in huge demand. So I think having an environment where people can try things out and being able to do it in a very comfortable manner, not being intimidated by what they're doing, how they're doing, a kind of a virtual lab environment is very critical to empower the operators, the people that we have invested into, so that they get to learn how to deal with this new technology. Even in XApps and RApps, we are trying to look at fully automated network. So there are going to be, all these events are going to get generated. Now, when you trigger one of these, ultimately before it impacts the network, somebody has to really feel comfortable that it is doing the right thing.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise the operator, meaning whoever is running the network, is going to get impacted. And you don't want to have churns. And when you have a churn, you cannot go back and say, well, something did it and I don't know. So being able to get an educated resource pool, which is familiar and comfortable with all these tools, is very critical. And I think that's a challenge that you have to solve, because we are in a software business. I mean, so are you. Trying to recruit somebody who really knows it has become even more challenging than it was.
Yeah.
And trying to understand somebody who really, and with this whole, rapid churn in the industry, it has become even more difficult. So how do you train? How do you make them more familiar with the technology? I think that's a big challenge.
Fantastic. Great answer. Thank you very much. We're wrapping up actually at the moment. So my main message really is that without great leaders here contributing into TIP Academy, the skill agenda is not going to move forward fast enough. So we really make sure that there is a very clear path of learning from understanding the basics through to more technical fundamentals to more advanced learning journeys like this. So look out for having advanced courses where we'll have Rimedo Labs and Rebaca involved and really helping to immerse and instruct and teach either in very automated fashions or in actually hands-on practical fashion as well. The whole point here is TIP Academy is designed by the industry for the industry. So we absolutely are looking forward to more contributions coming forward so that we really enrich the learning experience going forward. Marcin, Samir, thank you very much for today. I really hope you have a really good end of Mobile World Congress. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.